Welcome to Season 4 of You're Not Alone with Townsend. On this podcast, I'll be sitting down with guests from all over the world to discuss everything under the umbrella of mental health, diagnoses, sharing stories of resilience, medical advice, and even getting some tips and tricks from licensed counselors. The goal of this podcast is to teach us how to understand others, ourselves, and help spread love and light, one episode at a time. Please make sure to like and follow this podcast, and if you'd like to see the videos of these conversations, hop on over to my YouTube channel, TownsendTmusic YouTube, where you can find the podcast and my latest music. This podcast is run solely by supporters and listeners just like you. So if you'd like to help keep this podcast and project going, please consider hopping on patreon.com/TownsendTmusic to be part of the team. You'll also find extra content and questions with each and every guest. Let's hop in. What is up, everybody? Welcome to this episode of You're Not Alone with Townsend. I cannot believe we're already on Season 4. The episodes so far have been so amazing, and I got another one for you today. This one is something we've actually not discussed before, so I'm excited to learn more, not only for you guys, but for myself as well. We're going to be talking about HIV and STDs, things that need to be a conversation. I know that I have heard so many wives' tales and myths that with time I'm realizing aren't even true. They weren't true. So we're going to have Dr. Q on here. She's actually located in Arkansas. I saw her on the news and thought, that's it. I have to have her on my channel. So it is such a pleasure. Dr. Q, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for helping us talk about a topic that most people just don't want to talk about. It's kind of hush hush, which I hate because it's something we all need to know about. It's sex ed is something that I feel like they don't do very well in schools. And so we grow into these adults that have no idea what we're doing. It's kind of the blind leading the blind.
Exactly. You are so right. It's the blind leading the blind, and people, just navigating things the best that they can with the limited knowledge that they have. So it's kind of, a worst case scenario.
Absolutely. Okay, so Dr. Q, what I like to do is let my guests kind of introduce themselves. So you're welcome to give your name, age, location, job title, whatever you want my listeners to know about you.
Awesome. So as she mentioned, I am Dr. Quinyatta Mumford. I go by the Village Public Health Doc or Dr. Q. I'm located in Little Rock, Arkansas. I am the executive director of the Village Public Health Training Center and the CEO of Village Public Health. I am a public health practitioner. I absolutely love all things public health as it relates to adolescents and young adults.
That is awesome. I've never heard of that career before, but I love it. That sounds so important.
Yes. You know what? With COVID, a lot of people just were unaware of all the things that are related to public health. The fact of the matter is, public health is where you live, work, play, learn, worship, and where you grow. Those are all the things that concern us. We look at things from a population health perspective. When you go to your clinician is looking at you as an individual. I look at the population collectively. So for Village Public Health, our target population is 13 to 24. So we are concerned about all things that are related to individuals that fall within the 13 to 24-year-old age range from a population perspective. That is our population.
I love that. I know at 13, heck, even today, I'm still kind of like, what am I doing? You're just kind of wandering through life. So the more education that we can get and that we can share, it is so important. And I love that sex ed is something that you touch on because we talked about this earlier, but it's just something that people don't talk about for whatever reason. It's embarrassing to discuss, and heaven forbid you look up STDs or something like that. So I appreciate it. And let's hop in. Okay. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're very open about HIV and STDs and these sexually transmitted type things. What makes you so passionate about this age range and these topics?
Okay, so, one of the things that makes me passionate is that, one, as a public health practitioner, it concerns me when I see health disparities. When I was navigating through the doctoral program, I have my doctorate in public health leadership. One of the things that I studied was HIV and the ending the HIV epidemic. Arkansas is one of the states that was awarded ending the HIV epidemic dollars because of the number of cases that we see that's driven by the fact that we are a largely rural state. When I was was doing my studies, what I realized is that although we had integrated community health workers into our quest to end the HIV epidemic, there was a huge gap when it comes to servicing or educating the 13 to 24-year-old population. And so that became a great interest of mine, because we can't end the HIV epidemic. We can't reduce STIs if we exclude such a sensitive and large population. I mean, when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, 13 to 24 is probably where you're going to start to have interest in sexual activity, and really where we really need to focus on making sure that they have the right information at the right time in a way that they could appropriately utilize it.
You should write a book. I could listen to you talk for days. That was so well worded.
Thank
You just
you.
need to take over the podcast, basically. You just need to take my job. That was perfect. Okay.
You make it
Okay.
easy. You make it
I
easy
know.
to talk
Yeah.
to.
Well, no, you're making this like so interesting. I even remember when I was a kid, I remember hearing about HIV specifically, and it was just like a hush hush topic. I remember they talked about how someone positive with HIV back in the day, if they thought they were in the pool, they had to shut the pool down, they had to drain it, they had to evacuate. It was just so many things that weren't true. We did not know enough about it. So let's chat about what is HIV.
So, first of all, I want to make sure that we articulate this in a way that your audience, can really take it, not necessarily say to articulate it in a way that they can understand, but I want to articulate it in a way that they can walk away and feel confident about it. So, when we talk about HIV, it is broken down as the human immunodeficiency virus. So if we just focus on immunodeficiency, we have immuno, which is the immune system, and then we have deficiency, meaning that there is a lack of. So it is a virus that weakens the immune system by attacking the CD4 cells, which then those cells are important because the CD4 cells are what fight infection in our body. So if we leave HIV untreated, it can then progress into AIDS. But a lot has changed since we first learned about HIV. And we were worried that if an individual who was diagnosed with HIV got in the pool, that we needed to, close the pool down because they may infect other people. With modern medicine, one, we know that that's not true. That's the first thing. That's a myth. The second thing is that with modern medicine, HIV is no longer a death sentence. An individual can live a long and healthy life if they stay on their treatment protocol.
Okay, very good. Yeah, speaking of that, I want to chat about some myths and some facts regarding HIV. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just had a memory pop up of the Princess Diana. And when HIV was a huge thing, everybody's like, no, 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 don't talk about it. Don't come in contact with them. They basically were on isolation. Didn't she go into the hospital and like shake the hands of someone with this diagnosis? And people just wigged out. Like she should not have done that. She shouldn't touch them. And it helped to get through that stigma of, okay, wow, you can treat them like a human being.
I
Now, a
love
quick
the
shout
fact
out to our
that you brought
sponsors.
that up, because unfortunately, we're still in a quest to demystify HIV and to destigmatize it and get people to understand that they are people, right? It's just like if you have a diabetes diagnosis, it's a chronic illness. However, we're not going to treat you any differently. We know that there are some precautions that you have to take in order to, maintain the appropriate, measures and things, right? It's just like any other chronic disease. You have to be aware, and you have to be, you have to take preventive actions, right? So myth, it is not spread through casual contact. The fact of the matter is HIV is mainly transmitted through unprotected sex, shared needles, and mother to child. Those are the primary means of how you're going to come in contact with HIV. Yeah. So that's unprotected sex. That can be not using or improper utilization of contraceptives, shared needles, and mother to child transmission. Okay. None of those have anything to do with going to the pool, shaking somebody's hand, being in the same proximity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Another thing that people tend to think when it comes to HIV and we talk about myths is, when HIV first came out, there were a lot of myths around the type of people that contracted HIV. It was very stigmatized that it was isolated to certain groups of people. The fact of the matter is, if you're engaging in any of those activities, if you're sharing needles or you're having unprotected sex, your risk is just as equal as anybody's. So it is not isolated to any single group. Um, as most things, there will be trends that you will see, but those are just, they're trends, right? We know that when you engage in risky behavior, your risk increases. So we have to take in consideration, think about this from the matter of risk factors and protective factors, not in terms of isolating certain criteria or characteristics of people.
If you're looking to buy or sell, I have the perfect realty company for you. Clark & Co. Realty is located in the Benton, Bryant, Arkansas area, and they understand that buying or selling a home is more than just a transaction. It's a life-changing experience. That's why their team of highly seasoned real estate professionals is dedicated to providing exceptional, personalized services for all their clients. They truly take great pride in the relationships they build, and they always work relentlessly on the client's behalf to help them achieve their perfect real estate goals. They always have the client in mind, and I can speak firsthand when I say how reliable, trustworthy, and quick they were. When I was looking to buy my first home, they were there with me every step of the way, answering every question I could think of. They showed me a great amount of knowledge and patience through the process. It's no wonder they've won so many awards for their outstanding services and their excellent relationships with clients. So if you're looking to buy or sell, there is no better option than Clark & Co. Realty.
What else you got as far as myths go, or facts?
As far as myths, if you look healthy, you don't have HIV. That's a myth. The goal is, remember I said that things have changed since we first learned about HIV?
Right.
And that, people can live long, healthy lives. So we have this campaign that's been going on for a long time, and it's undetectable in equals untransmittable, right? Because if you are taking your medicine and you get your levels down, then you're not going to transmit the illness. But that means that we have to keep people in care. But it's also important that, individuals also are aware of medicine like PrEP, that if you know that you engage in risky behaviors, that you are possibly going to be exposed, that you go ahead and adapt a treatment regimen that's going to prevent you from getting HIV. So just because you look healthy does not mean that you don't have HIV, but the same goes true for chlamydia, gonorrhea, herpes, syphilis. Just because someone's not demonstrating symptoms or they're asymptomatic, that does not mean that they're disease-free. Health does not equate to without disease. That is an improper definition.
Love that. Absolutely. I feel like anybody should get tested, really. I feel like it should be a regular thing if you're having sex frequently or with other people, or like you said, if you're doing things outside of the norm, maybe get tested. I feel like that would be so beneficial. And again, just making it the norm of go get tested for yourself, for your own sake.
That's exactly right. We want to normalize getting tested. We want to make it just a part of things that we do. It's just like when you go to the doctor, there are two things that the doctors are going to do. Actually, three. Three things that when you go into a clinician's office. They're going to weigh you, they're going to take your blood pressure, and they're going to take your temperature. They're going to do those three things. And getting tested should be as normal as getting your blood pressure checked, because we know that if you get ahead of high blood pressure, then you can reduce your risk of complications down the road. The same thing holds true for getting tested. If you get tested, get treated, you prevent yourself from having long-term health impacts down the road.
Yeah.
But then furthermore, you reduce the risk of, transmitting illness onto someone else because you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you pointed out just because you're asymptomatic doesn't mean you don't have something. I think that's one thing that I've learned as I've aged. Just because someone doesn't have symptoms doesn't mean they don't have it. And they may not even know they have it. So it just spreads more and more and more and becomes such a big problem.
And that contributes to the stigma as well, because sometimes imagine if an asymptomatic person passed on an illness, right? Then the person that they passed it on to is going to think that they betrayed them. But the fact of the matter is they were simply unaware. That's why it's important to be proactive about getting tested with or without symptoms. As far as myths, those are primarily the things that we hear, other than the one that we're trying to debunk every day. And that is young people.
Okay.
2 condoms is not better than 1. If you took physics class, you learned about friction. If you rub things together, you're more likely to have breakage. The best course of action is to make sure that you know your status. 2 condoms is not going to get you there.
I love that you said this and you pointed this out. There was a post going around Little Rock, Arkansas saying,
Yes.
hey, these things are spreading. Be sure to wear 2 condoms. And I love that you took that and you shared it, because I even got to thinking, wow, maybe I know things incorrectly. Maybe, you know what I mean? It's something that we don't talk about. So even that little bit of a post, you think, if that's real, maybe I'm the one that's wrong thinking differently. So I love that you took that and you said, actually, let's break some myths here. So I think that's important for people to know.
Yeah, and that's important too. Like, that's our goal, is that we want to serve as a resource. We want to make sure that people have the right information at the right time to protect themselves. And sometimes we just put out information. That the beautiful thing about social media is that it keeps us connected, right? However, we tend to like things that are sensational, right? That message created fear. It elevated awareness about something that can't be documented, because where did you get the information that herpes was on the increase in Arkansas? Because if you look at the state data, herpes is not one of the sexually transmitted diseases that they are accounting for. And so it creates a lot of fear and a lot of misinformation. And then it also introduces stigma, because now you are led to believe that people that engage in certain behaviors, that they are more likely to have herpes. And unfortunately, in our subconscious mind, when we think something, then we treat people differently. And that puts us farther behind the 8 ball, which is why I wanted to address that post. Number one, if you are a parent and you believe that wearing 2 condoms is the way to go, then you're educating your kids, and I don't need you to do that. And then number 2, for the 700 times that it was shared, the number of people that got that message, we need to make sure that they know that, in fact, using 2 condoms is counterproductive.
What? It was shared 700 times?
That was last week. It was shared over 700 times. I can only imagine, to what extent it's been shared now. Unfortunately, we live in a society where the truth doesn't generate the same level of sensationalism. And so we have to work even harder, to try to demystify or debunk the thought that people should be utilizing, 2 condoms.
Yeah. Like I said, even as a knowledgeable person, I feel like I know a lot. I do a lot of research. It caught my attention because it made it look like a legitimate reference. And it was like, hey, pay attention. This is on the rise, yada, yada. This is what we can do. And I thought, well, that seems really odd. So I love that you were doing that. Yeah, getting on there and debunking it. And that is so wild. But you make a good point. The fear factor gets spread and people react much faster than looking up the facts. It's hard to take 2 extra seconds and look up facts. And speaking of that, what are some statistics regarding HIV or STIs or anything in that category?
So when we look at information from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, most people know it as the CDC. What we know is that about 1.2 million people in the United States are living with HIV, meaning that they have a known or potentially unknown. I want people to understand that when we say living with HIV, 13% of those people are unaware that they have HIV. So this estimate of 1.2 million people, 13% of those don't know that they have HIV. When we talk about adolescents and young adults, that 13 to 24 age group, they account for 21% of all new HIV diagnoses. So when we talk about data, we're looking at 2 different things. We're looking at prevalence. That is people that have been diagnosed in a lifetime, right? The number of people that are living with HIV, regardless of whether it's a new or an old diagnosis. When we talk about incidence rate, those are new cases. So we typically look at incidents in a given year, right? So in this year, how many new cases do we have? Right? On average, the 13 to 24-year-old population accounts for about 21% of new HIV cases, which is problematic because it's something that many of them don't have a whole lot of knowledge around what HIV is, right? Because it's not something that we talk about. It's not something we're talking about at school, and it's definitely not something we're talking about at our kitchen table. We do know, what we also know about this is that we talk about HIV. That's 1.2 million people. There are over 2.5 million STI cases. That's chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis reported annually.
Annually? Oh my goodness.
Annually in the United States. And what we know is that when you look at the latest data, STIs are declining, right, across the nation, right? However, what's not changing is that the bulk of the burden still exists amongst that 13 to 24-year-old population. So when you look at Arkansas and you see chlamydia cases, you see gonorrhea cases, the majority of those cases live amongst the 13 to 24-year-old population. The last thing I want you to know is that there is an even greater disparity when we look at it from race and ethnicity. The Black community and the Hispanic community are disproportionately affected when it comes, and this is largely due to systemic barriers, lack of access to resources. Also, in these communities, access to the education and the willingness to talk about it amongst families is also a little bit different. And so that poses a challenge and puts them at a risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, oh man, I do feel like schools can do so much better, as can us as parents. But you think about it this way. It's that problem that just keeps lingering because the parents weren't educated, so they may not know what to say, or like I said, they're educating their kids incorrectly about 2 condoms. Don't do that. Just don't educate them. And then it goes on and on. And so you don't know enough to pass down. You hope maybe the school would cover it. The school doesn't cover it. And then we're just left clueless.
Exactly. So you raised a very important points. You know, we have gaps in generational knowledge. Then we also have the fact that things are just simply changing, right? Society is just substantially different. We have a generation that is the most connected, yet the least connected, right? Yeah. They are very connected when it comes to technology and they have access to people, but yet and still they feel isolated because they are not being seen, heard, or understood because they're just different. And so as parents, we have to learn how to navigate these hard conversations. Number one, first and foremost, the most important thing is without judgment. Right? Because anytime we introduce judgment, then we close the door for their willingness to communicate, and we lose access to understanding in terms of how they are experiencing childhood. Because the way that they're experiencing adolescence and young adulthood is very different than how we experienced it. And we cannot raise them based on our raising because that raising doesn't work anymore.
Girl, you are preaching. I love it. Absolutely. Everything you say, I'm like, yes, ma'am, that is good. Absolutely. Okay, so one thing that going through school and growing up, I'm hearing you talk about HIV and AIDS separately, but when they're telling you about it, they say HIV, AIDS as like it's one thing. So what is the difference between the two?
It's a world of difference. Okay. Yeah. So I told you that HIV is the human immunodeficiency virus, right? If it's left untreated, it can lead to AIDS, but it doesn't have to, right? So AIDS is the most advanced stage of HIV. So this is part of the reason why we started calling things sexually transmitted infections instead of sexually transmitted disease, because infections are typically a cluster of symptoms, right? Mm-hmm. But if we treat them, we don't have to get to the worst case scenario. So in this situation, AIDS is the end game of HIV if HIV is left untreated.
Okay. Perfect.
So what happens and when you have immunodeficiency, right? It's attacking your CD4 cells, right? Those are supposed to protect your immune system and fight off infections. Well, if it's left untreated, you are damaging those cells. In terms, you're damaging your immune system. When it gets severely damaged, where there is no reversing, now you have AIDS and you are more, what you start to hear people say, immunocompromised. And so now you have progressed to AIDS. We are trying to stop the progression, but to stop the progression, we have to destigmatize HIV so people know that it's okay to seek care and to be in care and that they can live a long, healthy life if they remain in treatment. So AIDS can be prevented. The progression to AIDS can be prevented. HIV can be prevented. But if you get HIV, we want to make sure that you don't progress to AIDS.
Love it. Love it. That's so simplified. I love it. It's like step by step. You should be the teacher. You should be the sex ed teacher that goes in. Did they ever hire you for those gigs? Like to go into high schools?
So one of the things that we have going on right now is the Vibe Check Tour. As you can see in my background, it says Vibe Check. Vibe Check is our statewide initiative to go around the state and partner with youth-serving organizations to come in and provide this information, but not just about HIV and AIDS, because there is so much conversation that needs to be had before we even get to the prevention part, such as making sure that they understand consent, making sure they understand what boundaries are. We was just in Pine Bluff, Arkansas at Focus Academy. And we started their series off on boundaries and just getting insight from students, not understanding that, there are different levels of circles and your expectations of those circles differ, and your boundaries contingent upon where people sit in your life should be different. But at what point in childhood do we ever have a transparent conversation to really lay that out and allow students to understand? But then also the number of college students that we come in contact that question whether or not they consented raise concern for us.
Yeah.
And so we go out, we want to talk about those conversations that we often take for granted that students know. We assume that they know what boundaries are. We assume that they know what consent is. We assume that young people know what love is.
Yeah.
And they're chasing something, and we're focused on the end game of that they're engaging in sexual activity, but it's not the sexual activity that they're chasing. Sometimes what they're chasing is the ability to be seen and heard and understood, and unfortunately, sometimes to feel loved, because they don't know how to qualify love.
Girl, I need to come on one of those talks. That is awesome. I love that. I love what you were doing. That's so cool. I wish they would have done more things like that. Like I said, I remember, I'm flashing back to when I was in school a long time ago. We had a woman come in and it was, nobody was paying attention. She spoke to the school and it was a scare tactic. It was like, I just remember being terrified, but it wasn't educational. It was just a fear factor of don't do this. Don't do this. And that was it. I didn't learn anything from it. And so I love what you were doing. Thank you so much. Speaking of consent, okay, something that I've heard back and forth, do you legally have to inform a sexual partner if you are aware that you have an STI or HIV? How does that work?
Okay, so laws are going to vary by state. So it varies from state to state. In most places, though, individuals are legally required to disclose an HIV diagnosis, right, to their sexual partners. Failure to do so can result in legal consequences. Arkansas is one of those states. Other STDs may not have the same legal requirements, but ethically, you should. A lot of times, if you go through like the health department, or if the health department is aware that you have a diagnosis, they will do the disease intervention specialists. They are individuals that specialize in partner tracing, basically like contact tracing. They want to know who your partners are so that they can make sure that they're aware and that they get tested. All of this requires, though, some level of honesty, right? They can only contact people that you let them know that you engaged in sexual activity with. And so it is very, very important that, number one, don't trust that people tell you that they've been tested.
Yeah.
It's best if you have a new partner to go get tested with them.
Mm-hmm.
And worst case scenario, ask to see the results and verify that they are actual real results. from a real entity.
Yeah.
And then don't take that somebody being asymptomatic means that they are without illness, because that may not be the case. And so that's why we encourage people that if you trust somebody enough to engage in sexual activity with them, then you guys should have a strong enough bond that you can go get tested together. And that way you can be fully transparent with one another.
I love it. I love it. And like you said, kind of beat that stigma of it's okay. We all need to do it. It's almost like your yearly checkup, go get checked out. It should be one of those things the doctor's doing anyway. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor. I feel like we could go on and on. We could do a whole other segment on those topics you discussed earlier. But where can people go to find reliable information or resources?
Reliable information. You can get information from cdc.gov. I love cdc.gov as a resource because they are going to have age-appropriate resources. They're going to have adolescent and young adult materials. They're going to have middle-aged population, things that you should be worried about. And then they also have resources for the aging population so that they can be aware and proactive about their sexual health and wellness. You can also check out villagepublichealth.org. We offer a number of resources as well as skill building opportunities for adolescents and young adults. You can tap into your local health department. They will have resources available through the health units, but they will also have information available through their community-based organizations. These are organizations that are right there in your neighborhood that have partnered with the health department to make sure that you have the right information at the right time so that you can make informed decisions about your health.
I love it. I love it. Now, you said y'all are based out of Little Rock, Arkansas, right?
We are based out of Little Rock, Arkansas. However, we do provide services across the nation. We have provided, services here in Little Rock and as far as Korea.
No kidding.
Yes.
Wow.
We love our international partners and driving this work. Young people are the same, regardless of where they are located. They are dealing with two primary issues that we see from a public health lens that young people, regardless of where they're located, are dealing with: mental health issues and sexual wellness.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. I like you. I feel like we need to get to know each other. You could teach me a lot of stuff.
Listen, we friends now. I don't know if you know it, but we friends now.
Dr. Q, thank you so much. I truly appreciate it. Now, what's your social account that people can go and follow?
They can follow us at Village Public Health on Facebook. They can follow me on Village Public Health Doc on Instagram, and then Dr. Quinyatta Mumford on LinkedIn.
Love it. Love it. Okay, everybody, y'all know how this works. Me and Dr. Shear going to continue talking, but we're going to get a little bit more personal. We're going to do those extra questions that we do with every guest on Patreon. If you want to hear those, hop on over to patreon.com/TownsendTmusic. We would love to have you join the family. Even if you don't join, you can watch these extra questions now. But that is how we keep the podcast and this whole project going. If not, we'll catch you next time.
If you'd like to hear the rest of this interview, visit patreon.com/TownsendTmusic. And don't forget, you can also watch the interviews on our YouTube channel at TownsendTmusic YouTube.